Yes, good morning. All right. So let's now start with the next concept. How exactly we are going to write down a web service class. So we studied this in the last session that whenever you wanted to expose the Salesforce data to the outer world, let's say if you are having an object and maybe you wanted to, maybe you wanted that data inside in that object. Now, someone from the external world, maybe with an application, he could also access that data. So if this is our requirement, where we wanted that somebody with an external application could also access the data inside the Salesforce, then we particularly we have to write down something called as a web services APIs, because API is that medium by which somebody from external world, an external application could also interact with the Salesforce, right? So now let's see how exactly we are going to do that. So basically, the class which we are going to create, let's have a what to say, I'll try to quickly finish out this theoretical thing because I wanted to take a program by today, so I would just try to finish this up as early as possible. So see, the class which we are going to create, right? There are a few of the things which you already know about. Let's just for a consideration, if you are writing a test class, isn't it? If you're writing a test class, so how would a class would be considered as a test class? If there is a class, how compiler is going to understand, how Apex runtime engine would identify that class is as a test class. So what you do in that time is like you annonate that class with something called as @is test, @is test. So when you enter that @is test, so compiler automatically understand, oh, this underlying class actually is a test class, right? In the same way, if you would remember, the future methods you have created inside a class, let's say if you have a future method, or maybe if there are any methods which you wanted to become as a future method. So what you do is that time was like you annonate that with @future method. Now, in the same way, if you are creating a class and you wanted that class to become a web service class, an API, so we have to particularly annonate that with something called as @REST resource. So when in front, at the top of the class, whenever we write down this keyword a REST resource, so that class is considered to be a web service class, an API class. Now remember, if you are creating a class which is a REST resource, if you are creating a class which actually is a API, it always have to be a global class. You always remember that. It always have to be a global class. In fact, all of the methods and the members of that particular class should also have to be global. Why? Because this class which we are creating, a web service class which we are creating, our intention is, somebody from external world would going to access those parameters. Somebody with an external application could access those functions, those methods, or those variable values and all. So everything inside in that class, the scope should always be global. If you would make it public, it definitely going to throw you the error, right? So every REST resource class, all of the members of that class, including the scope of class itself, have to be global compulsory, right? So that was the first thing. That was the first thing. Now, uh, we also would have discussed, I guess, we already had a discussion about what are the different forms of HTTP methods, right? So what are the different forms of HTTP method? There are few of them is like get, post, put, pass, and delete. So particularly like what type of operation does the web service class would serve? Based on that, we are going to select any one function out of these five. It's going to be get function. If you wanted the functionalities of get, the function you would be creating, the annotation you would be creating would be HTTP get. If you wanted the functionalities of post, you would be writing a keyword HTTP HTTP post. Similarly for put, patch, and delete. Now, what these function exactly would do? We are going to discuss this inside in a program. Just to just to have a continued discussion onto this. Get is used to retrieve the data, just like your select statement in an SQL query would do the same thing. Post is used to perform insert. Put is used to perform update. Patch is used to perform upsert, which actually is insert plus update. And similarly, delete would perform deletion of the records from a Salesforce object. All right. So accordingly, we would have to select any one method out of these five. And this would completely based on what operation your web service is achieving, right? Just hold on for the 5 minutes. I will be back. I'm muting myself for 5 minutes. You please be on the line. All right. So let's start by taking a few of examples. I would, first of all, let's understand what does it means by the HTTP GET method. And name please. So, see, I would be having this use case, wherein let's see what we need to done with this one. So, create a RESTful web services where we are going to particularly fetch all of the accounts. Now, see, in real time, we usually don't do like this. Actually, we don't fetch the complete set of records inside an object, but this is just for an understanding. Yeah, I mean, for this example, it could be like this, but otherwise, with the next one, we are going to see the more real-time version of this one, where either we are going to supply a particular parameter. Let's say we wanted just to get the details of one of the account called Burlington Textile Corporation of America, like something like this, right? So how to make that precise query on something and get that precise record, we're going to see with the next one. This example, although it would serve how exactly the web service needs to be get designed and how to get the data and everything. All right. So let me create a class for this one. Let's start with the programming part. So I'm taking you to the developer console and let me create a new class for this. Closed out everything. And I would be creating a new class. The name, let me try to give the name. Just copy this from the notes. Account manager services. Right. So with this name, I would be creating a new class, accounts manager services. Right. Now see, as I have discussed, we are intended to make this as a web service. So whenever a class needs to be converted into an API, you always have to annotate this with a keyword called REST resource. This is very much important. If you won't do that, compiler wouldn't identify this as an API. All right. So it must always have to be annotated with this keyword. This is very much compulsory. And if you have see, as soon as we make it a REST resource, it immediately has pop up one error over here. And this error is about the access specifier. So this access specifier and everything inside in this class as well. Not just with this access specifier, whatever you would be, whatever you are going to create inside the class, though it's a function, though it's a method, or maybe it's a variable. So every member of that class, along with this class itself, this has to be global, right? But before that, let me try to write down a few of the parameters, default parameters inside into in this bracket. See, when we write down this REST resource, we compulsory have to give a parameter called URL mapping. Now, what is the purpose of this URL mapping? I'll just let you know about this. So let's have a discussion. But let me first of all formatize this. So how you are going to write it? Every time this is going to be same. You would write down a keyword called URL mapping. You make an equals to, and then you would always going to have enclose this within the single inverted commas, and then you have a two brackets. Here, you can write down a nickname for your web services. Now, let me first of all type it out, and I'm going to explain. Let's say accounts service. Now, see, Why I have written it like this, let me try to make you understand. See, if I go to the account, for example, or maybe with any objects inside in the Salesforce, and let's say if you are accessing this record, right? If you are accessing this record, even if you're not accessing the record, you are onto the homepage of any object. Do you see one thing into the URL? I am accessing contacts, but that contact is represented by an object ID 003. And this we already had discussed. For the case, it's 500, and maybe for the accounts is 001, for the opportunity is 006. Now, what does this three-digit numbers actually represents? Right? We had that discussion that every object has something called as an object ID. You never would going to see the name of object over here, although rather it's represented by a code, by a number. And when I was explaining this, I probably have taken one example that every student in a class, I mean, when we were in the school and colleges, right? So that time, every student usually have a roll number. And whenever, let's say, the teacher is taking that attendance, so he could either call out your name or maybe he would just comfortable with calling with that roll number. So this is particularly a number which would represent that object. And every object, though it's a standard or a custom, inside in the Salesforce, and every object have that number. So what does this reflects to you? If I am representing opportunity with 006, maybe lead with 00Q and contacts with 003, what does it actually represent? So see, this would represent actually what happens is like, because URL, this complete set of whatever has been written over here is called as URL. We had that discussion. The full form is Uniform Resource Locator. So every URL is actually exposed to everyone, I mean everyone, because it's available on World Wide Web, right? When something is available on www dot, it's actually is exposed to everyone in the world, right? So if let's say if I don't wanted to expose, I mean your data, let's say if I would be opening a record, if I would be opening this record of lead, and I literally don't wanted to expose that this actually represents a lead record, right? So we have replaced that with some of the numerical or maybe an alphanumeric number. So this help you out to maintain the securities, right? This helps you out to maintain the security, and your actual object name would not going to be exposed into URL, because URL everybody could access. Ultimately, you are going, if you would copy this URL and you are going to paste it into any of the browser, so that's going to be exposed to everyone, isn't it? So just to have that security, what we usually do is like, we never would give the name. We never would expose the name of the class to everyone. Rather, what we do is like, we always give a nickname to that particular class. So that's why the class which you are creating, that's why the name of the class, I mean, this API, for the programming purpose, its name is Account Manager Service. But this API, when I would expose this to the outer world, whatever business logic I'm going to design, the purpose of this, if anybody wanted to access this class, if anyone wanted to get the facility from this particular class, he is not going to get this name. He would rather get this name. So you can give any nickname for this class. This is just like you. This is my actual name. And let's say this is my nickname. This is my second name. People usually call me with this name. And there are a very close set of there are very close set of persons, those who know this is my actual name. Most of them will know this is my name. Whenever I have been exposed to outer world, I have been, everyone has called me with this name. So this is something like that phenomenon. Now let me make it global. Let's see what kind of error we got with this. So if you won't make a class as a global, so REST resource class must be declared as global. It's very clear. It's crystal clear kind of thing. All right. The error message what it is giving is absolutely clear, and it gives an idea of what the kind of error we are facing. So this class must be a global class, right? This class must be a global class. So now if I save it, the error is gone. All right. So what we are intending to do with this class, we wanted that whenever someone would call this account service class, whenever someone would call this account service, not class, web service, because this is the name of web service, this is the name of class name cannot be called, web services can be called. So whenever someone would call this web service, whenever someone would call this API, he should get he should get all of the data inside account object. He should get all of the data inside account object. So this is my intention, right? This is my intention. What is my intention? My intention is to retrieve. I'm not sure what is the spelling. Or that's simple. To get the data from account object, right? This is what is the intention. If someone would access this web service with the help of this web service, rather I could say, with the help of this web service, name account service, let me make it as account service. Someone could access the data of account object. Anyone from the outside world could access the data of the account, right? All right. So let me do that. Let me do that. So how would you facilitate this? So whenever you wanted to retrieve the data, right? Whenever you wanted to retrieve the data, you wanted to get the data, you wanted to fetch the data. I mean, you wanted to fetch the data or something like that. Where is that? Yeah. So we have to make a use of get method. So get is that method which would help you to retrieve the records, which would help you out to retrieve the record from the resources. And how we can use that get method. So this is that annotation, HTTP get. So I am creating a method for that. See, understand, I would be creating a method, global, and the method itself has to be global. Understand, global, let's say static and not void, because it would return the record. So not void, but global static list of accounts. See, understand, list of account, because it's going to return that list of account. Let me now give any name to this. So let's say get all account records. So I am preparing a method around over here, and this method, this method would be returning all of the accounts. So I'm going to fire a query and collect it inside a list collection, list of account, let's say LST accounts equals to, let me now design a query. For design a query, select, let's say ID, comma name, comma rating, comma value of industry, comma, let's say annual revenue, and then let's say the value of phone, the value of, let's say, fax, the type, and let's say the active status, active underscore C. So I wanted to get hold this data from account, right? From the account. And let me make it order by name. Okay. So this query would return, all of the records inside in the account object, and they are going to be arranged in the ascending order with the name. I mean, from the name it's going to be get. Now I would return the same thing. I would going to return this LST accounts, right? I would going to return LST accounts. Now see, so I have prepared a method. What this method is doing. This method is collecting all of the records inside in the account object. This method is collecting all of the records of account object, and it is storing inside a list of account. And then particularly it is returning that. So this method is actually it's doing what? It is getting the data and returning it back. And so, this method has to be defined with @http get. This method has to be defined http get. So it is getting the data and returning it back, right? So this, and see, if you wouldn't have understand this with the first example, no problem. I would take one more, all right? And we would going to understand, I'm going to take uh, at least one example onto every of the methods. So you don't have to literally worried about that. Sometimes this happens, you know, I mean, There might be a few people amongst you, those who have understood this in the first time itself. There might be a few of them, those who are finding it little difficult to understand, right? So don't worry. This is just the first example, not the last one. So I am going to take a few more of them so that you would make yourself clear with this, right? Now, more importantly, so this class have been created. Now, this class is something which is called as API, Application Program Interface. This class is something which is called as web service class. Web service class. Now, how you are going to test it? How you are going to test it? How you are going to test it? All right. So now, for the testing purpose, for the testing purpose, I would going to take two examples. I would make you aware about two separate methods. I'm going to make you aware about two separate methods. For a few upcoming examples along with this one, I will make you aware that how to test. You are going to test it using Workbench. And then later on, once I find that you got that all those understandings, right? You got all those understanding. I would be, I mean, I'm going to use another tool for this testing purpose. That is going to be Postman, right? So you are going to learn two tools. You are going to learn two tools. But let me try to describe under which circumstances you can use what of them. See, this workbench, which I'm going to use to test this class. So this workbench actually is a Salesforce created tool, just like your data loaders, right? You have that tool, data loader. It's an on-premise tool, on-site tool. All right. So I was talking like, the workbench is, I mean, a Salesforce developed tool. Workbench is a Salesforce developed tool, right? But in real time, how we manage that and everything, we're going to talk on later on when I would make you aware about the Postman tool. But let me first of all check it with the workbench, right? So how we can workbench is an on cloud tool itself. So what you can do is like just open another tab and you can type workbench simply workbench.developerforce.com. Otherwise, you can go to Google and if you don't find it, you can simply ask the Google to find out workbench for you and it would give you this result, right? You can simply click it on and definitely you'll be going to land onto the same interface, right? So for a few days from now, you can add this as a bookmark to your browser so that you could access it, really quick. Now, now this is a cloud workbench. Workbench is what? It's a cloud tool. By the way, this tool is created by Salesforce. As you can see, developerforce.com, right? This tool is being developed from the Salesforce. And that's why it could directly interacted with the Salesforce. Like your data loaders would have that direct interaction with your Salesforce org. Now, in the same way, the workbench could directly interact with your Salesforce org. But in real time, how we do this everything, right? We're going to talk this later uh, when we were going to learn about the Postman app. Anyways, now see. So you first of all would require to log in, like you always require to do this, even with the data loaders as well, right? Guys, just give me 1 minute. All right. So the first thing is like you have to make a login from the Workbench app, right? And you merely don't require to install anything. I just have told you that this is available on the cloud. So you would just require to access with this URL, or else if you want, you can Google this out. All right. So it would ask you, I mean, which environment you are trying to make a login. We are making a login into this developer account. By the way, every developer account is a production. Every developer account is a production org. In real time, it might be possible that most of the time, whenever you test it, you would test it within a sandbox. But because right now we wanted this workbench to be get connected with this org, my own company 32, whatever the name of this org is. And this is a developer account, and every developer account is your production org. All right. Just forget about the API version. That would always take the recent one. That would always take the recent version of API. Just to give you a small idea about this, if let's say if you have created a class, but you created it 6 months back, all right, you wanted to test that, and due to certain reasons, your org is not updated. So it would be on the, it would be on the, I mean, uh, the previous versions of API. But usually this does not happen. So, if I would be creating a class, I could be check for the versions and all. I can even show you that as well. So you can go to the setup menu, and you can, let's say, you can go to develop Apex class. See, here is something, do you find this API versions and all? So few of the classes are on API version as 56. Few of them would be on 57, as you can see. The latest version of API is 58. So whatever the class we created, like we just have created a class called accounts manager service. If I would going to check out, if I would going to check out what is the, or else you can check whatever the class we created so far. The API version of every one of them is 58. That is the latest version of your org, right? So you merely don't have to worry about this. You can simply ignore. Click onto this checkbox. I'm agree to the terms and conditions, and then just log in. So it would ask the access, right? This particular, and you obviously would have to allow it. You cannot deny that. You would have to allow the access to the workbench, that it should get the access to your organization. Now, workbench can perform a variety of operations apart from your API testing, right? So you can fire a queries over here. You can get the records, or you can even apart from SOQL, you can also fire the SOSL queries, Salesforce Object Search Language. It always starts with the find keyword. Then you can get the information about the standard and the custom objects. You can get the information about your metadata components, right? You can also get it with the Salesforce Inspector as well, right? So you're from the Salesforce Inspector as well, you can get the information about metadata. So Workbench can literally perform a lot many operations. With this, you can even perform your DML, regular DML operations, like you can perform all these operations of DML, right? You can perform the deployments as well from here. Although deployment, when we are doing the deployment, we'll have to create an XML file for this package.xml. But with the help of that package.xml, you can even perform deploy, or you can retrieve the records. And what we are going to see, for our purpose, what is our purpose? See, I have created a web service class. How I'm going to test it out? So for our purpose, we would going with this option. The last one is utility. Inside in the utility, you have this option. There are, some another options as well, but you have to go with something called as REST Explorer. You have to go with dot REST Explorer. As soon as you would click onto this REST Explorer, this type of interface would open. So you first of all would have to select the method. Your web service class, your web service class contain what sort of method. Now there is one interview question related to this, and you can just clarify this at this moment itself. You don't require to have much knowledge for that. They would ask a question inside in a web service class. Inside in a web service class, can we have multiple HTTP methods? That means if you have HTTP GET, if you have HTTP GET, can we have HTTP POST as well? I mean, I could create another method. Below to this, let's say I would be creating another method and I can give as a HTTP POST. Let's see what would happen in this case. If I would try to make it, if I would, let's say if I would try to create a class, something like this, and I would try to save. Let's see what happens. You see that you have been immediately caught with an error. Immediately caught with an error, right? So the first thing is like, this is not possible. And you don't have to, don't have to see it from here. You don't have to see it from here. Actually, from this as well, we can understand. There could be only one HTTP method inside a class. If I would ask you inside in this web service class, what type of HTTP method has been used? And why I wanted that information? Because when I wanted to test it, I would have to precisely check for what kind of method that web service class is being created on. So every web service class can have only one method of HTTP. So if you, it could have, see, if you don't define, if you would define another methods, that's not an issue. I'm not saying this could have only one method. It could have multiple methods, but not multiple HTTP method. जैसे आपने यहाँ 5 मेथड बना रखी, एक मेथड का नाम है गेट ऑल अकाउंट, किसी और मेथड का नाम है एबीसी XYZ, वो चलेगा। इन सब मेथड्स में से कोई एक ही मेथड है जिसको आपने किसी से एनोनेट कर सकते हो, ठीक है। सो दिस इज व्हाट इज द डिफरेंस, राइट। हाँ चलो, अब नाउ कमिंग टू दिस वेब सर्विस क्लास। ये वेब सर्विस क्लास में क्या यूज हुआ है? गेट मेथड। एंड सो आउट ऑफ ऑल दीज ऑप्शंस आई वुड बी गोइंग टू यूज दैट गेट। I would be going to use the get. ठीक है, चलो, let's now understand how we are going to test it out. So अब आपने करना क्या है? What do you have to do? सर्विसेज को छोड़ के यहाँ से डेटा और ये इतना आप डिलीट करो, ठीक है, डिलीट करो। ऐसे आप यहीं से दिख रहा है, काफी सारे ऑप्शन है, ठीक है। उसके बाद you would always you'll have to follow the same pattern. You'll have to write down something called as apex rest. Apex rest, because the web service class you have created is a restful resource. We are not working on SOAP. We are working on REST, representational state transfer protocol, right? We are not working on SOAP. We are working on REST. So services tak chhod dijiye, oblique apex rest oblique. Here you would have to give the name of your REST resource. तो उसमें आपको क्लास का नाम नहीं लिखना, ये नाम, ये मैं बता रहा था कि will always give a name to the REST resource. And how? By URL mapping. So I'll have to give the name of this, right? As and when I would execute this, so what it is going to do, ये जो workbench application है, ये जाके कनेक्ट होगा हमारे Salesforce और के साथ, और वहां पर वो हिट करेगा इस पर्टिकुलर एपीआई को, वो ढूंढ के निकालेगा। और ये क्लास क्या रिटर्न कर रही है आपको? इट्स गोइंग टू रिटर्न ऑल ऑफ द डेटा इनसाइड इन द अकाउंट। वो सारा डेटा जो है वो आपका, वो कहाँ गया? अरे यार, आई जस्ट हैव क्लोज दैट आउट। ओके, नहीं नहीं नहीं, इधर है। अच्छा अच्छा, सॉरी सॉरी, ये बीच में जूम के कंट्रोल आ जाते हैं। हाँ, तो हियर इट्स गोइंग टू डिस्प्ले दैट एवरी इंफॉर्मेशन। यहाँ पे वो सारी इंफॉर्मेशन आपकी डिस्प्ले होगी, ठीक है। सो लेट्स टेस्ट इट आउट, लेट्स टेस्ट। देखो अभी मैंने एग्जीक्यूट किया है, ठीक है, तो एरर आ रहा है यहाँ पे, इज एन एरर, couldn't find the match for URL. क्लास में कुछ ऐसा है जो मैंने सेव नहीं किया. @rest resource URL mapping equals to this. Yes, 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 yes. Here you would have to mention a star as well. That was missing. That was missing. This star. Let me hit this once again. See. So inside in over here, you also would have to mention. This is a fixed format actually. If you would try to make any changes, you just have seen we're going to end up with some certain sort of errors with this. So in this particular parameter, after giving the name to your web service class, you also would have to mention a star. Right now, let's see. See, we hit that API, and this is what is a response. This is what is a response. If you want, this is like compiled. If you wanted to see the raw response, you can see it like this. Now, what format is this? Tell me what format is this? What is this format? What is this format? Yes, it's JSON. It's JSON format, right? So this actually, although it has been compiled, right? यहाँ पे आप देख रहे हो तो यहाँ पे आपको इसका finest version दिख रहा है. But actually में internally this is in the form of JSON. तो what just have been happened is like कि आपने यहाँ से एक request send किया, वो request जाता है Salesforce पे, Salesforce उसे authenticate करता है, उसके बाद में वो ढूंढ के निकालता है वो पर्टिकुलर वेब सर्विस जिसका नाम है अकाउंट सर्विस. और जब अकाउंट सर्विस हिट होती है तो अकाउंट सर्विस अपना डेटा देती है, लेकिन सेल्स फोर्स उस डेटा को रिस्पांस में जाने से पहले इट कन्वर्टेड दैट होल रिस्पांस इनटू जेसन फॉर्मेट और फिर वो इसको देता है. ये अलग बात है कि यहाँ पे जेसन से आपको इस फॉर्म में दिख रहा है ना, आप चाहे तो उसको ऐसे देख सकते हैं. इफ यू वुड क्लिक ऑन टू दिस वर्लिंगटन, ये एक रिकॉर्ड है, एवरी फोल्डर इनसाइड ओवर हियर इज रिकॉर्ड एंड प्रोबेबली इसका काउंट भी काउंट शो रॉ रिस्पॉन्स एक्सपैंड और कोलैप्स. नो काउंट नहीं आता है. एनीवेज काउंट नहीं है इसमें, बट चलो ठीक है. सो if you would hit this folder, every folder inside in this is actually represents a record, right? So ID, name, जो भी आपने query लगाई है, query में जितना आपने मांगा, this everything has been hit, right? You can expand all of them to see the records like this. तो ये इसका फाइनेस्ट वर्जन है, बट अदरवाइज ये जो रिस्पॉन्स आया है दैट इज इन द फॉर्म ऑफ जेसन. दैट इज इन द फॉर्म ऑफ जेसन. सो दिस इज हाउ we can write down a web service class, and this is how with the help of workbench too you can test it out. Now for a few examples from now, we are going to use this workbench, and later on I would show you the Postman app for this. Now I wanted every one of you to install this application called Postman. All right, we're going to see it later on. That's all for today. You have any question, please go ahead and ask. Yes, any questions around this or anything, or something else? Any questions? Any questions? All right. Thank you so much for joining. Have a nice day.